Ah, the Scout. The egotistical, cocky class that everyone hates. Well, besides spies, and snipers, and sticky spamming demo men. Well, you get my point, right? Now, as all of you may know, I am a Scout main, and before you go and comment, "Oh, you're such an edgy skunk, OMG, kill yourself," I want to explain to you why I find the Scout class enjoyable, and how maybe you can too. I will also go over any of the loadouts that you can use to use the Scout class effectively. For the few people who don't know what the Scout is about, he is a flanking and picking class. What do I mean by pick? Well, according to the TF2 wiki, a pick is a solitary kill on an important class, like a soldier, or heavy, or another scout. Scout's speed and powerful scattergun allows him to get behind the enemy, pick them off, and then run away while he still can. Now, this topic about how you can play the Scout was covered much better by Lazy Purple. I recommend you go check him out, but I'm going to just go over the basics on how you can use him. As I said before, the Scout is a flanking class. He's able to be such a good flanking class because of his speed and maneuverability. He can exploit his speed and maneuverability to get behind an enemy and kill him, or cause a big enough distraction for his team to help out. But it doesn't stop there with his maneuverability. The Scout has the ability to double jump. If pulled off correctly, a double jump could be used to jump over rockets, pipes, stickies, and maybe even dodge bullets. Experienced players can even exploit their double jumps by jumping on random platforms that they can't even see, effectively making them even harder to hit. Now, that last part is going to take a lot of effort to pull off, but once you do, you'll be dominating the entire server in no time. But all this maneuverability does come at a cost. Since you're moving around so much, and moving so sporadically, you need to have really decent aim in order to be able to hit your targets. Now, the best strategy in order to get the best damage out of your scattergun shots is to use something called a meat shot. Basically, a meat shot is when all your scattergun pellets hit the target directly, causing the most damage. Now, I'm not going to go over the weapons here, that's going to be in a different segment of this video, but that basically just sums up what you can do as Scout. The Scout has a wide variety of weapons, all with their own unique uses and strategies. First off, we're going to go over his primary weapons. The stock scattergun is by far the greatest scattergun you can use for the Scout. With a base damage of 60 per pellet, which the scattergun has 10, you're able to do a lot of damage in a short amount of time, since you have 6 bullets in a clip. Next is the Force of Nature, one of the most unique scatterguns for the Scout. With the Force of Nature, you could have even more maneuverability. Having trouble trying to get up that platform? Just use the Force of Nature. Not only can it help you get up onto platforms you couldn't normally get to, it can also help you reach gaps that you couldn't normally cross. Like if you're trying to get from the top of the high tower to the enemy battlements to kill that one body-shotting sniper. This effect can also apply to enemies, so if you shoot them, they will be knocked back quite a bit. Now, the base damage for the Force of Nature is higher than the stock scattergun, but it's not necessarily able to do more damage, because the less pellets you hit, the less damage you do. And you want to make those shots count, because you've only got 2 shots in a clip, and if you miss, that may be life or death. Next up is the Shortstop, another unique scattergun for the Scout. When you outfire with the Shortstop, you're able to push enemies. Kind of like the Force of Nature, except with a little less knockback. But the Shortstop does have its downside. 20% increase in push force taken from damage and air blast when the Shortstop is deployed. It also has a 33% smaller clip size and 60% fewer pellets per shot. Then we have the Soda Popper, with a base damage of 60 per pellet, which the Soda Popper has 10. The Soda Popper also has a unique feature called Hype. To build up Hype, you must hit several targets. After the Hype meter is full, you can activate it, giving you 5 additional jumps. If you thought Scout's double jump was amazing, you're gonna love the Soda Popper. And just like the Force of Nature, it has a 60% smaller clip size, meaning there's only gonna be 2 shots. But the upsides outweigh the downsides. You have a 25% faster reloading speed and a 50% faster firing speed. The second to last scattergun is the Babyface's Blaster. And who boy does it have a lot of downsides. Now, back in 2012 when it was added in the Pyromania update, this weapon was crazy good. But during the Gunmetal update, this thing was nerfed into the ground. And nowadays, it's hardly ever seen by scouts. The base damage and the amount of pellets is the exact same to the soda poppers, so there's not much difference there. And on to the downsides we go. The Babyface's Blaster has a negative 34% clip size. It's not as bad as the Soda Popper and the Force of Nature, but it's also not the greatest. You also start off with a negative 10% slower movement speed. Granted, you are still faster than all the other classes, but not by much. Now, I hear you thinking, oh, the Babyface's Blaster is not that good, I probably shouldn't use it. And you'd be right, if it didn't have a feature that gave you more movement speed every time you hit someone with the thing. But there's also a downside to that as well. Every time you double jump, you lose a little bit of your speed. And even if you get hit, you're going to lose a little bit of your speed. So basically, when you said that this weapon was crap, you'd be right. And last but not least for the Scout Scatterguns, we've got the Backscatter. Just like the Babyface's Blaster and the Soda Popper before, it has a base damage of 60 and it has 10 pellets. Remember how I talked about how Scout is a flanking class? Well, the Backscatter is perfect for this role. Every time you hit someone from behind, you're going to do mini crits to them. So with this weapon, you really want to emphasize being a flanking scout. And on to the downsides. Now, the downsides aren't actually too bad on this. It's got a negative 34% clip size, just like the Babyface's Blaster. It has no random critical hits, which is fair because you do mini crits from behind, and you have a 20% bullet spread, which I again think is fair. You're trading accuracy for more damage. And that about wraps up all of Scout's primaries. Now we're going to move on to his secondaries. The first secondary on this list is quite obvious. It's the stock. And for all those stock purists out there, you know what I'm going to say. The stock pistol goes perfectly with a stock scattergun. The stock pistol is mainly used as a finishing weapon. So basically, you can do a lot of damage with your scattergun and then finish them off with a pistol if you A, shoot all your bullets, or B, miss. The stock pistol has a base damage of 15, allowing you to shoot 6 rounds per second. Next is the Pretty Boy's Pocket Pistol, one of my most favorite pistols to use. It has the same exact base damage as the normal pistol, but it has a fun little effect. Upon hitting an enemy, you can gain up to 7 health. Combine that with the 15% increased firing speed, and you can gain up a lot of health. The only downside that this weapon has is a 25% smaller clip size, and even then it's not that bad, it's still a really good weapon. The last secondary of the pistol variety is the Winger. It has a base damage of 17 with 5 rounds per second due to its 15% more damage. When the Winger is being held in your hand, your jump height is increased by 25%. The only downside of the Winger is that it has a 60% smaller clip size, so it's really not all that reliable as a finishing weapon. It's more something like the Force of Nature or the Soda Popper. It allows you to get to places easier. You know, when you really look at all of Scout's weapons, they kind of all go along with his speed and maneuverability. The next set of secondary weapons is the Scout's drinks. First, we're going to be going over the Bonk Atomic Punch. When the Bonk Atomic Punch is used, you are able to become invincible for 8 seconds. Then after that 8-second period is over, you have to wait 24 seconds in order to use it again. Well, unless you hit a resupply cabinet, obviously. And just like with Uber, you are not, by any means, invincible to any forms of knockback. So don't be that one free-to-play scout on 2-Fort that just drinks his bonk and runs out into a sentry nest just to get blasted into the corner and then annihilated once his bonk is over. And when you come out of bonk, you're basically going to be as slow as a Babyface's Blaster without full speed. But it also depends on how much damage you took while you were in the bonk state. The more damage you take, the slower you'll be. The max cap is 200 damage. Then we have the Criticola. If you use this thing, then you really don't want people to have fun. And you should fucking kill yourself, you worthless piece of trash. But yeah, jokes aside, the Critical is actually pretty good. It has the same effect of 8 seconds and 24 seconds to recharge, just like the Bonk. And when the Criticola is used, it gives you mini crits for that amount of time. But for every attack that you make, you are marked for death for about 5 seconds until the debuff is over. Now this drink doesn't technically count as a drink, but I'm gonna count it as one. And you should all know what it is by now. It's the Mad Milk. Basically, the Mad Milk is just the Girardi for the Scout with an extra healing function. Basically, how the Mad Milk works is that every attack you do, 60% of that is going to heal you. Teammates can also heal from this as well, unless if it's a Pyro's Afterburn. And that was the last of the drinks. Now we're going to move on to the last secondary weapon for the Scout, which would be the Flying Guillotine. Now, the Flying Guillotine is a projectile-based weapon, just like the Sandman. It has a base damage of around 50. Just like the grenade launcher's pills, this projectile aims in an arc, meaning that if you want to hit someone farther away, you must aim your crosshair up in order to hit them. Before, the cleaver used to be a really good combo with the Sandman. You hit them with a ball and then hit them with the cleaver and they're dead instantly. But now this has been completely nerfed, and now it's no longer fun. When the cleaver is thrown, it takes about 6 seconds to recharge. When you hit someone from long range with the guillotine, the charge time is decreased by 1.5 seconds. When an enemy is hit by this, it causes them to bleed for a couple of seconds. And last but not least, to make everything fair and balanced, random crits are disabled. And that was about it for all the secondaries. Now we're going to move on to his melee weapons. First off is the stock bat. And I know what you're thinking, because of like all the other stock weapons being good, this one's gotta be good, right? Wrong, this thing is garbage. You'd think it would be good with its base damage of 35, but it really isn't. Later on down the line, when Val was making new bats for the Scout, they decided to make his melee weapon a more supportive role, meaning that it's going to support his speed and maneuverability again. I'm going to be going over the next melee weapon in a second, but I just want to make a little disclaimer. I'm not going over the Holy Mackerel or their Pan, because they're just reskins of the stock bat. And with that, the next melee weapon we have is the Sandman. The Sandman, just like the cleaver, shoots a projectile out of the bat. It kind of goes in an arc as well. It used to stun people, but now it just slows them down, so it's not really that good anymore. But the base damage of the bat itself is 35, and the base damage of the ball is 15. The Sandman also lowers your maximum health by 15 points. Now, the slowing effect depends on how far you hit the person, and it can be from around 1 second to 8 seconds. It also takes 10 seconds for the ball to recharge unless you pick it up off the ground. Next, we have the Candy Cane. The Candy Cane is actually very useful to use with the Pretty Boy's pocket pistol, because it also heals you in a way. Whenever you kill someone, it doesn't matter which weapon you use, you're going to drop a small health kit. But the downside is, it's not very good against explosives, because you have a 25% vulnerability to it. The base damage hasn't changed either, just being the same as the stock bat, which is 35. Next, we're going to go over a really fun weapon to use, if you use it correctly. I'm talking, of course, about the Boston Basher. See, it's fun in a way of risk versus reward. It has identical stats to the bat, damage-wise at least. But the thing is, every time you hit someone, they bleed for a couple seconds. But every time you miss a swing, you hit yourself. But if you're good enough with hurting yourself, you can actually do a Boston Basher jump, meaning that you can reach higher places, just like the Force of Nature. The next weapon on this list is the Sun on a Stick. The Sun on a Stick is basically a downgrade to stock with its 25% less damage, making its base damage 26. The only time it'd be useful is when you have a pyro on your team working with you, because this thing does critical damage on burning targets. But other than that, it's basically worthless to use. Next, we have the Fanivore. Don't plan on using the Fanivore to actually kill people, because the damage is reduced by 75%. But it has a system that you can mark people for death, meaning that everyone who hits them does mini crits to them. This effect can last up to 15 seconds. But like I said, within that time, you're going to be doing mini crits, so if you're on the receiving end of that, you're probably going to die. Another cool feature is that you do crits when you should normally do mini crits. So if you have a buff banner or a Girardi, then you can do full-on crits with the thing. But as I previously said, other than that, it's pretty much garbage. You don't want to use it at all. The second to last melee weapon for the Scout is the Atomizer, my personal favorite bat to use. Now, you may be asking, well, Cloaker, why is it your favorite bat to use? Well, it gives you more jumping power. You can literally create the perfect maneuverable Scout by using the soda popper, the winger, and the atomizer, and you will be good to go. And this is because you can triple jump while the weapon is deployed. But the weapon deploys 50% faster, so you can't just whip it out and do a triple jump. This is a very recent change that happened for the Blue Moon update. I think I covered it in that video, but putting that aside, the weapon is basically like a mini market gardener that swings faster. Why is this? Well, because it does mini crits while airborne. It doesn't do crits, and the weapon does 15% less damage against players, but it's still a pretty fun weapon to use as a meme if you're trying to hit people with it. And finally, the last weapon is the Rap Assassin. This thing is basically better than the Sandman because the ball does a bleeding effect for 7 seconds instead of just slowing the person down. And it also doesn't decrease your health, so you get to keep being a 125 health scout. The ball also recharges 25% faster, but the Rap Assassin itself just does 65% less damage, so you shouldn't use it for like hitting people, you should hit them with the ball instead. And we are done with Scout's weapons. In the next one, we're going to be going over how to use his weapons effectively, or basically how I would use them. Okay, for this section, I'm actually going to make this kind of quick and brief, just 1 to 2 sentences explaining how to use the weapons. I'm still going to go into detail in these sentences, so you can at least know how to use these in the correct situation, but let's get to it. Okay, the stock scattergun, you basically want to use this all the time unless it's a very specific situation. The Force of Nature, you want to use this if you want more maneuverability, but still want to do damage. The Shortstop is basically if you just want to be a bully. The Soda Popper is for more maneuverability if you really want to do a lot of jumping, but don't want to rely on killing people. The Baby Faces Blaster, you don't really want to use this, but if you want to go fast, go ahead. The Backscatter is for when you're trying to flank the enemy a lot. Okay, the Stock Pistol is used all the time, basically, besides the Pretty Boy's Pocket Pistol, which you can use at your leisure if you want to heal. The Bonk Atomic Punch is something you really don't want to use unless you're trying to get into a place, but people are probably going to just chase you down. The Criticola is if you're really a douchebag and like to ruin other people's fun, or if you just want to kill people easily because you can't kill people normally. The Mad Milk can be used as a supporting tool to extinguish your teammates, or it can be used selfishly to heal yourself. The Winger is if you want more maneuverability by jumping higher. The Pretty Boy's Pocket Pistol is, as I demonstrated and talked about before, is if you want to have a medic up your ass, basically. The Flying Guillotine is basically if you want to make people bleed and have a longer range option without using up ammo, because the Guillotine recharges really fast. The Stock Bat and its reskins you generally never want to use ever. The Sandman, you really don't want to use it, but if you want to slow down enemies, but you're basically having lower health. The K.A.A.N is for more health to be paired with the Pretty Boy's Pocket Pistol, or to put out any afterburn or basically anything. The Boston Basher is basically the stock. You don't really want to use it as a weapon, but it can be used as a utility where you can Boston Basher jump. I mean, it also could be used as damage because it bleeds, but yeah. The Sun Stick is basically worthless unless you're working with a pyro, but that's really not all that common. The Fan of War can be used in MVM, but it can also be used in normal matchmaking, but you generally don't want to use it for damage. The Atomizer is for maneuverability, obviously, giving you more jumps, and you can also mini-crit people, so it could be viable. And I've also noticed that this thing does crits more than every other melee. The Rap Assassin is basically your alternative to the Sandman, and it's basically a longer range guillotine, so you could go ahead and use that. And that's about it for everything. That's how you use all of them, or at least that's how I would use them. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you found it informative. If you did, please leave a comment, and if you didn't, well then leave a comment as well saying why you didn't enjoy it, and maybe give me some criticism on my video on how I can improve these types of videos. Now, this video took really long to make, and I actually kind of enjoyed making it considering I like TF2 and I like playing Scout, so this was a really fun thing to do. And also, one more thing, I have a shameless self-promotion thing. Please go support me on Patreon. Why? Well, I mean, I'd kind of like to see if I could make money on this thing, so I could tell my parents, ha, I make money off of something online, because, they don't really believe me and whatnot. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao.